Welcome everyone to the quarterly meeting of the uh, uh, Public Defense Services Commission Audit Committee. I'm the chair, John Hutzler. Currently, we have present David Terry, Reed Kajikawa, Kim Freeman, Ralph Amador, and we are missing Deanna Horn, Jacqueline Moore.
Jacqueline Moore's right here. I'm in person.
Oh, okay, great.
I'm with Scott here in HID conference room.
Yep, we're together.
Right. Okay, thank you. So we can get started. Greetings, everyone. Let's begin with any announcements that anyone may have. I think I think we're not all able to stay for the full meeting. Is that correct? Does anyone want to let us know when they have to leave? Or
yeah, I have a hard stop at about 1:55 because I have a 2 o'clock meeting that I have to attend.
Thank you. Anyone else? I have one announcement. I'm going to schedule for our next meeting the election of the chair of the audit committee. I've served in that role since the committee was established, but we are overdue for election of a chair. As a reminder, the chair under our charter must be one of the external members of the committee. So that means that the eligible candidates for chair would be myself, Deanna, Reed, David, or Jacqueline. Please keep that in mind as we approach the next meeting. Moving on, Scott, have some updates from you.
Okay, first on, well, I got a text from Rob. His computer crashed and he's trying to join us, so just a heads up on that.
Oh yes, I see him back now.
Okay,
Thanks.
excellent. So on the PAE CME audit, we're finalizing the edits to that. I'm expecting to schedule an exit conference here probably within the next week. It's just a few last minute tweaks that are happening now. Other than that, the risk assessment, if there's any questions on that, I can speak to that before I move on. Okay. The risk assessment was completed. There were 28 different stakeholders surveyed for that risk assessment. I got feedback from the executive director last week. He identified 6 risks that he thought were worthy of an audit. So we'll consider that in crafting the audit plan for the next 3 years. But I'll be submitting that risk assessment to the Secretary of State probably within the next week once I go through it and just clean it up a bit. That's the status of our risk assessment. Any questions?
Just a question on that, Scott. The risk assessment that you submit to the Secretary of State is just the risk assessment itself, not the audit plan, which eventually will flow out of that.
That's correct. It's a requirement to give it to the Secretary of State. So they'll have that. And from that, then I'll craft the audit plan in collaboration, of course, with the audit committee over the next few months.
Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm. And in the status of audit recommendations, there's 26 outstanding audit recommendations right now currently. I closed 2 last month. The next status update that's due is in October. Otherwise, most of these are waiting for status updates in 26. There will be several more added to that, of course, once this audit's completed, but that's where we stand right now is 26.
And can you give us a sense of how long some of these recommendations have been open?
Several of these have been open for 2.5 years. There are prior audits that were done There's a reliance, I think, on the FCMS system to be implemented to resolve a number of them, as well as the cap structure. There's several for that. So really, a lot of these are pending that implementation.
Thank you.
Mhm.
And you mentioned that you closed two recently. How many in total have been closed?
Or over the last 2 meetings, there's been 4 closed.
Okay, thank you.
And then the status of the AC chart, the audit committee charter, that's a discussion point we could have now as far as we are holding these public meetings. Is this the direction we want to go? Are there changes we want to make to that? Essentially, we're waiting to sort of decide what we want to do after already having provided a lot of feedback on the charter draft. So I'd like to sort of open up some discussion on how we feel about that right now, and then decide our next steps if we can.
Yeah, by way of background,
Mhm.
we're currently operating under the original audit committee charter, which was adopted at a time when everyone assumed that this audit committee, like those of most agencies in the state, would be meeting in closed sessions. In the course of our review and consideration of possible changes to the audit committee, the former executive director asked the Department of Justice to review a draft of a revised audit plan, and DOJ advised that that the meetings of the audit committee were subject to the public meetings law, which is why we are now operating under the public meetings law, because the provisions in that draft revision, which DOJ was looking at, were essentially the same in the original charter, which was then active. So we had an opinion from the DOJ that said essentially you're subject to the public meeting law, and we began meeting on that basis. However, there are competing concerns involved here, because audit committees are often involved in discussions of agency risks that may present risks, in which discussions of those risks may simply present a risk if they're open public discussions. On the other hand, there's the strong interest stated in the public meetings law toward public disclosure. So, I think there are ongoing conversations between the CAE management, the chair of the audit committee, and the commission and its governance subcommittee regarding whether we should consider changes to the charter that would allow us to meet in closed session, or maintain the current structure, which requires that we meet in public sessions. So that's kind of the background of where we are now, and the conversations that are going on. And I'd invite members of the audit committee to share their thoughts on this.
John, I had just a refresher question. The DOJ opinion on this group being a public meeting, was that verbal advice, or was that a written formal opinion that was
No,
received?
that's verbal advice at this point.
Okay.
Yeah.
My professional opinion is, if this body is not making governance decisions on behalf of the whole agency, I do not view it as a public meeting body. And I would suggest that the agency get a formal opinion from DOJ if they want to make it exempt from public meetings law.
I second that. Because DOJ's own audit committee, in which DOJ's internal people sit on, is not subject to public meetings law, and DAS's audit committee, as well as my audit committee at Oregon Military, is not subject to public meetings. The only one who does public meetings, from my understanding, would be that as public interest, like high public interest, and that would be DOT. So Department of Transport, and they work out of Yellow Book versus Red Book. So it's a little bit different of a standard than the Red Book standard filed by most internal.
Yeah, my understanding is that whether you work out of the Yellow Book or the Red Book is not the issue here. It's what does the Oregon Public Meetings Law require? And if I understand correctly, the DOJ's position on this is based on the fact that our audit committee under our charter is a committee of the Defense Commission itself, whereas many of the other audit committees in other agencies are appointed by the executive director of the agency. And that's the distinction that I understand they are drawing. If they were to issue a formal opinion, it could possibly affect other agencies whose audit committees are appointed by their commissions. I believe the Department of Transportation is, and that may be why they are operating under the public meetings law, why their audit committee is. There are a number of other agencies that have governing commissions and might find themselves in the same category with DOJ that they are telling us we're in, who do not currently meet in public sessions. Maybe the lottery, which has a lottery commission, might find that its audit committee is subject to the public meetings law. Department of Forestry, maybe. I mean, there are a number that have commissions that may be that may find themselves in the same situation that we do with regard to the DOJ. I think there are a couple of possibilities. I mean, we could, as David suggests, although I think that would probably be something that the agency's executive director would need to request an opinion from the DOJ. I don't think we have the same authority as the audit committee to engage the DOJ in that way. However, it's also important to keep in mind that it is not, the DOJ does not have the authority to enforce the public meetings law. That is within the province of the Oregon Ethics Commission, and any one of us could ask the Ethics Commission for an opinion. And if the Ethics Commission were to agree with David, for example, and say that, no, we don't think you're subject to the public meetings law, that would provide us with protection in the event that a court were to decide that we were in fact subject to the public meetings law. It protect the members of the commission from any liability under the law. But
Reed has his hand up.
yeah, Reed.
John, and I'm sorry if this is a lack of experience with these kinds of settings for me, but for my information, is it something that is the verbal opinion that we've gotten from the Department of Justice? Is it based on something that is the subject matter of the things that we discuss, or is it a question of the composition of
Yeah,
the
no,
board, or
I
the-
believe it's a function of the fact that the committee is appointed by the commission and is defined under the charter as a special committee of the commission, and that therefore they consider us to be an advisory body to a public body. And the public meetings law applies to advisory bodies to a public body.
And I guess the second question I have is, was this was an opinion on this something that we would have previously relied on general counsel for advice on?
Yes, and in fact, we did have advice from general counsel at the time that at the time that the charter was adopted, that because it provided for only one member of the commission to be a member of the audit committee, that we would not be subject to the public meetings law. At the time we had that. Now there is no longer a general counsel for the committee, and so DOJ serves as general counsel.
Thank you.
So there are, I mean, we could do, or we could ask the agency to seek a formal opinion from DOJ. However, my let me see, I'm trying to recall now. I believe that the question has been reviewed not just by a single DOJ attorney, but by it's gone kind of up the chain there, and the question, my recollection, correct me if I'm wrong, Scott, but didn't we also speak informally with the Ethics Commission?
I don't recall we did that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. The Ethics Commission may still be unplowed ground.
Mhm.
So speaking now just in regard to the DOJ's position, my sense is that if we feel that it's important that that meetings of the audit committee be confidential, the way to address the DOJ's concern or position would probably require that the charter be changed and provide that the audit committee is appointed by the executive director and advises the executive director, rather than being defined as a special committee of the commission. Or alternatively, that we would meet in public session, but would justify under the statute, under the public meetings law, reasons why we might go into executive session to discuss certain matters. That's another possibility. So that's kind of where things stand at the moment, and the discussions with the commission and executive director will be exploring those options. If anyone has opinions on those, I welcome you to share them.
I'm hesitant to say that we need an actual written decision from DOJ because that may upset the apple cart of other agencies, depending on how they take things out of context and the way that it applies to this specific agency. As far as the public's interest, I mean, Oregon has the highest transparency laws and the public is entitled to know, but with internal audits, they become public record after published, so everything, work papers and everything is requestable by public records request. And so there shouldn't be anything that's above reproach for the work that's done by internal audit anyhow, other than those that are protected from public interest, like IT audits and things like that, or audits in which divulge to the public could cause a bad interest to the public itself, like physical security audits and things like that nature. As far as discussions from internal audit, I think with having it held public without being governance opens up some issues with discussion, like deep discussion about audits itself and the scope and where things tend to run towards. And then just confidential discussions for advisory nature when it's not yet like an actual risk or an actual finding, but just theoretical in nature. And the public's perception that it's an actual risk, like the sky is falling, like Chicken Little, but not really. Then the other flip side coin of that is, I think Scott, or any CAE that comes in Scott's role, if he stays at the agency or whatnot, for future like writing this for the future protection of the role, should have the right to not just report to the agency director, but to go to the commission in the event that the agency director is ignoring a risk or ignoring an audit finding or has an open audit finding that has lasted several years. So cutting them out of the charter brings some red flags as well. So I think it may be viable if DOJ stands on the fact that the charter, the way it's written, means it needs to be public sessions, and maybe keeping it that way. And then with the realization that executive sessions for anything that is advisory in nature or talking about risks that are not true or scope of audits that are not yet finalized. So reserving our public meetings for this committee to be based on things like open findings, things that are published in nature that are already available to public access, and then scoping special sessions to things that are hypothetical in nature, that are not solidified, known, might be advisable to think about. So, definitely, since there's a committee that reports to, I think it is wise to have a direct link for the CAE, Scott, in this position to have direct actable access to the commission in the event that the agency is not doing something it should be doing. So that charter is kind of important.
Yeah, no, I agree. Rob, are you able to shed any light on the commission's thoughts on this, or the subcommittees?
John, you've been involved in the communications probably more than I have, but I think you're spot on this, and I think that there are people. I think Susan, the chair of the governance subcommittee, was interested in not making it public meetings, but I think that was largely sort of the initial position of the agency as well, because that's just always the way it had been. So some of it is just it's the way we've done things, but I really honestly think they're open to this. I think you've been operating under open meetings for a while, for a couple meetings at least, and as long as we get, my personal feeling, as long as we have the ability, as long as the scope of executive session privilege covers what you think are sensitive areas that we may to utilize, I personally don't see a major issue with going to, public meetings, for our meetings. Um, Partly also, this is me speaking now, politically, the position the agency is in, I'd almost feel more comfortable with open and public meetings when we can do them. But I'm not speaking for the rest of the commission. It really has not come
Yeah.
up with the full commission. It's basically been me and Susan largely discussing this.
That's it. Thank you. And should also mention that one of our members, I mean, Bob Terry, is the chief audit executive for Portland State, and his audit committees have been meeting in open session for quite some time. It's a completely new area to me, and I'd be interested in hearing from Rob how um, uh, how he what his experience has been with the effectiveness of the audit committee meeting in public sessions, whether it has restricted any free and open discussion of issues or not. Are you still here?
John, just to
Yes.
clarify, were you referring to me at Portland State?
Yes, I'm
Okay.
sorry. Did I?
No worries. Yeah, so just to be transparent, at Portland State University, our audit committee, which is a committee of our board of trustees or a subcommittee, it does meet in public meeting sessions. They are recorded. The primary reason that is triggered is because the subcommittee is made up of a quorum of our board of trustees. Therefore, it triggers a public meeting. The only thing that I would say that is a difference between my experience meeting and presenting to that audit committee versus my public service serving as a audit committee member for internal audit committees for state agencies in Oregon is with PSU, it's definitely more formal. You have to get your docket agenda out, and you have to have a public comment section. And then if you want to have more sensitive discussion, you have to schedule the executive session and disclose what topic or exemption that triggers the executive session. Now, on the flip side, when I served on the Oregon Department of Education Audit Committee, I would say that the conversations we could have in the committee meetings, it was definitely more robust and a little bit deeper dive than what we can have at PSU, with the exception of the executive session discussions.
Mhm. Thank you. I'm sorry. Did I refer to you as Bob Terry?
You did, but it's not a big
Oh,
deal.
is that? Yeah, I was involved with Washington County government for many years as internal auditor, and we have a long-term commissioner by the name of Bob Terry. My apologies. Thoughts from anyone else? And this is a conversation that we'll be having certainly in December. But if anyone else has anything to share, feel free.
I think there's a potential to have a chilling effect if all of the meetings are recorded and we don't have the ability to go to executive session for some things. I know that one of the risks that we have talked about was some of the turnover at the agency, and I know that there are some HR components to that, which probably also should not be in a public session. The third part of this that I have a little bit of concern about is that sometimes like we identify risks and there are many of us who are outside of the agency who look in and see potential risks, but that the management from executive session can allay those risks. And that is some of the kind of the internal governance that I'm not sure is ripe for public meetings. And so I guess I do understand that this agency in particular I know that there's a need and it's a desire for a lot of its work to be done in a public facing way. But I do see, like, to me, I do see a real need to be able to have everyone allowed to speak freely, and then also there are certain topics that I think are really do need to not be on the YouTube channel, right?
And there are as David said, there are provisions for under the public meetings law for going into executive session. I think those would cover certain areas of discussion that have already been mentioned, like if you're doing an audit of IT, security, things like that, building security. Those are legitimate topics under the law to call for an executive session. However, I think what I'm hearing from Reed and also from David is that there are matters which do not qualify for an executive session under the public meetings law, which may be the subject of audit committee discussion, and that discussion is not as robust in a public meeting as it might be in a confidential meeting. So those are the kinds of things that I think we need to weigh going forward and consider our options, among which I would add are, there is also the potential to seek legislation that provides either additional exceptions or justifications for executive sessions, or additional exemption from the public meetings law for audit committees. That's another possible route. And if there were enough agencies with audit committees that might become subject to the public meetings law under the opinion of the DOJ, there might be enough momentum to seek legislative action. But nothing's happened in that regard yet. And my understanding is that if we request an opinion from the DOJ, a formal opinion, it will be carefully crafted to limit it to this agency. It will not say any agency that's got a commission or a public body that their audit committee is subject to the public meetings law. That's not how the DOJ approaches these opinions. So it might be a challenge to get others to join in an effort for legislative change. Okay, now I think we should probably move on. We've spent considerably more than 5 minutes, but probably addressed a lot of things that might have been brought up in the roundtable.
Well, just real quick to summarize then, what are we agreeing to as far as next steps or our path forward?
I think we're gonna continue our conversations with the commission and its subcommittee and the executive director and senior management regarding whether to pursue changes to to the charter to allow the committee to meet in closed session, or maintain the current structure and meet in public session at least until and if we choose to pursue legislative change that would exempt the audit committee from the public meetings law.
Okay,
And I mean, my sense from the conversation here in the committee, and feel free to voice opinions to the contrary. My sense is that the consensus of the committee, or those who've spoken at any rate, is that it would be preferable if we could meet in private session, but it is not it's not impossible to manage what this committee needs to do in public meetings with the currently allowable provisions for executive session. Anyone have a different view of the committee's kind of sense of what would be best here?
I
Go ahead.
did send Scott the ORS that exempts for candid conversations and advisory roles that are not yet formalized, which is the exemption that our agency uses when we have hypothetical conversations that entail like high risk or risks that, you know, are hypothetical in nature, just talking about risk or potential impacts without talking about like the residual risks, meaning like before mitigation or when management clarifies how they're going to mitigate. That would be advisory in nature and be exempt from public records and public meetings. So that's something that you guys can add to your charter in the event of, oh wait, for the charter for here. So I sent it to Scott directly so he could look into it.
thank you.
Thank you.
The
Okay.
intent is to protect the public from the sky is falling, Chicken Little kind of
Yeah,
thing.
no, I understand.
Not to be untransparent with the public, but to protect the public from mass hysteria when it's just hypothetical in nature.
Okay, let's move on to the operations update from management. Financial and operations. Ralph or Kim would like to go first.
Ralph, are you pointing to me? Okay, wow, let's see. Seems like there's been a lot since we met last, but some of, I guess, the highlights just to share. We have been working with the program analysts and our procurement team for contracts for the 25-27 contract cycle. So we've met all the established timeline deadlines. So that's a shout out to all the staff that's been working diligently to ensure we're working through all of the questions from DOJ, because all of these contracts are going through DOJ, Department of Justice, for legal sufficiency. So we're working on that. We will be getting those out early next week. Ralph, if that date's not right, please let me know, but I'm pretty sure that's our timeline for next week. And so that's consuming a lot of staff time across the agency, so which is great. Then we are starting conversations around our key performance measures, so our KPMs. So those familiar with state agencies, we have key performance measures that are approved by the legislature, and we are starting the process to look at our existing KPMs and either eliminate some, add some, change some. So we had our first kind of conversation on this past Thursday night with the commission work group. meeting. And so they gave us some really good feedback, and we've created an internal work group to start those conversations. And we'll be looking at our strategic plan, and then also the memo that Director Sandrigan did to the governor to make sure that we incorporate a lot of those items into our key performance measures. And these will need to be presented in the short session to the legislature in early 2026 to be approved, hopefully, or modified. And then we will implement those for the 27-29 biennium.
Kim, do you anticipate that that at least one of the key performance measures will specifically address the unrepresented backlog?
Yes. So actually, the legislature did approve one of those, or recommend one of new KPM to us. And even though it's written not as clear as I would like it to be written, to really focus on the unrepresented crisis and how we will address that, that is what the KPM is directed to. So we are working with the data team to see what kind of data that we can get, right, to make a data informed decision. So the goal is that it's 100%, meaning no one is on the unrepresented list. But what does that mean, right? Is no one on the unrepresented list for 30 days? Is it 5 days? Is it, 15 days? Those are things that we will be working as a group to determine what that looks like. And then also all the things we've put in place to hopefully alleviate anyone going on the unrepresented list, like our trial division. We have, the 3 offices, one in Salem, one in Portland, and one in Medford, who are working closely to, take cases off the list when there's capacity within our trial division teams. So yeah, that is definitely one of them that is on the list. So what else?
Did the legislature propose a timeline, a due date for when they expect that to
that
be
one,
achieved?
this one is added to our proposed new KPMs. So it will be in the, I guess they've added it, so it would be part of our 2026 KPM.
Oh.
So that one we'll be working on now, along with the existing 5 we have. So now we'll have 6. And then for the 27-29 biennium, we'll have potential new ones. That one will stay. It will not go away. So
I see.
Yes.
But they're not expecting it to be eliminated by 26.
Well, the goal is 100%. That is the goal
okay.
that has been set.
Yeah.
By the legislature. I am not sure. We are one, as you all know, we are one component to this crisis, which the commission called out last week. We're one piece of this puzzle, but hopefully we can put strategies in place to, work and figure out how best to get whatever date we select, right? If it's 5 days, 3 days, 0 days. So
yeah. Thank you.
Those we're working on. My goodness, lots of. I think the contract work from at least the policy team and the contract team and the data team is probably a lot of the work that's happening in on my section, or the side of CAP. We are working definitely more cross-sectionally across the agency. Like, we're working a lot closer with the fiscal team. I mean, we have been over the course of 2 years, but even more so now, making sure when we have meetings, they're covered cross-sectionally. So more people are in the room to have conversations, where before it may have just been a certain section, and then later go, oh, we should have probably had someone from budget. Now we have someone definitely from budget or the fiscal team in there. The data team is continuously creating dashboards to be used internally. And that's, again, to capture our data, to show, what's happening with our contractors, what's happening on the trial division. We have public facing dashboards as well. And then we're working with the unrepresented team, which is the team that is working to find attorneys for those on the unrepresented list. So we met with that team a couple weeks ago, and they asked for some enhancements to the internal dashboard that they're using, because they were using many different screens. So kind of consolidating to help them have better process flow and assignment of attorneys. That's probably one of our biggest successes over the last month for sure. I know there's a lot of just things happening at policy. We've adopted our customer service policy, which is a mandate from the governor's office. So that has been approved by DAS. We just revised our internal business travel policy, and we're creating a process manual for that, and a larger tool that will be used to better showcase when people are traveling or requesting conference time and things like that. I think we're doing a lot of hiring too. So I know they just posted 2 positions today. We'll be hiring another person for the data team. Hopefully that recruitment will go out this week, and then we'll hopefully be a full-fledged data team in the next couple of months. Ralph, I'll stop and let you add anything that I didn't add, and I'm sure you have a lot more, so.
Ralph, just to let you know, we're anticipating the Secretary of State's team to be here at 2. So if you don't have time to finish, we perhaps after they've had their shot. But go ahead.
Thank you, sir. Well, Kim covered a lot of bases with this. I mean, on the finance side, we're still reconciling our budget so we can get our budget out internally and get all of our agents, all of our units, their operating cash. Well, they have their authority to spend, to get all of their authority and make sure that every one of our working units knows where they're at and what they can do and how they can spend their stuff. We're doing some education on what managers can and can't not control, because this is the first time we're going to be pushing budgets out to individual units and not keeping it at an aggregate level. So it's a new thing for us. We're looking forward to doing that. FCMS is moving along as if you would follow that. We are in our selection phases of FCMS. So we're getting pretty close to finding, I think it's down to a couple vendors, and they're going through that process. I can't say a whole lot about that because I don't know a whole lot. I'm not in the selection part of it. I just get told things and what I'm supposed to decide. The selection committee is very closed and everything else, so that we can make sure that what's decided and what's said is kept in nobody gets an unfair advantage as far as anything's going on. But I know we are getting close to that. We're looking to possibly make an offer to somebody this month, which would put us in line to get things moving. Great process so far, but we're in line with everything happening there. We did get full funding for the project in our budget. It'll be bond funded, but we have a plan. We just got approved to use general fund and then get reimbursed for bond funding down the road. That just happened with the capital finance section. We are looking to work on our different policies for our pre-authorized expense unit because we took some reductions there that we're working through the commission with to make sure that we can pay all of our expenditures. We have had tremendous growth in all of our cases going forward. We have upcoming a forecast in October, so we're starting to put that stuff together so that we can have an intelligent conversation with OEA, which is the economic forecast branch of DAS, and OJD, so we can put forth the next iteration of the public defense forecast, which comes out in October. October and April of every year is when they come out. Yep.
Nice to meet you. You're Steve Bergman, by the way. Jacqueline.
Oh, I guess that they're coming in right now. So Kim covered a lot of what we needed to take care of. Again, she talked about the contracts. We're in the final phases of getting legal sufficiency on our provider contracts, and I know that our analysts are going to be talking to folks pretty soon here. According to our schedule, we were supposed to get legal sufficiency done this week and start compiling and getting contracts out to people for signature this week as well. So to give the providers a couple of weeks to look at them and make sure that they can agree and everything. So again, we're pretty much on track with this. Again, this was a new way of doing things. With getting some improvement. And again, and this leads me into our next phase of in October. So in the budget world, budget and finance world, this is a really busy time because we're working in 3 bienniums. We're closing the 23-25. We're operationalizing the 25-27, and we're starting to plan for the 27-29. So in October, we're going to start our policy option packages for 27-29, and we'll start getting stakeholder groups and everything else so that we can start getting some actual participation and public outreach with folks out there so we can have some more input on how we build our budget and what goes in it going forward. There's lots of talk of budget cuts and everything else. We haven't heard anything yet. We're just on watch because of what's happening at the federal level and at the state level. What happens at the federal level highly affects the state level. And we participate in the general fund pool of state government at this point. So we have to compete for resources just like everybody else does now. I don't think that there's anything else that we haven't covered. If there's questions, we can surely answer them. But yeah, Kim did a great job of capitalizing the information there. So I'm pretty much done, John.
Can I ask what you're projecting as the budget for the FCMS system, a new system?
Well, we got funded for like $16 million total. Couple million of that is for capital for debt payment. We're looking at I think it's about, when you take the positions off, it's probably around $10 million for the actual project with consultants and everything else, because we have 8 limited duration positions that are internal that are actually helping everything up, business analysts, business architect, project managers, and stuff like that. Those are limited duration positions. That was about $1.5 million worth of money there, and that's all bondable. All this stuff's bondable. So yeah, consulting costs and everything else. So the total package with other fund and general fund is about 16 million, but our other fund bond financing is 13.7 or $13.3 million.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
And what's the timeline? When is that projected to be online?
According to our plan, yeah, 13.8 is the financing is the bond money. It's 13.8 million. Our policy option package said that we would be done and implement and ready to go by the end of this biennium.
End of what?
This biennium, June of 27, we should be operational.
Okay.
Don't raise your eyebrows to me, sir.
Well, it's an IT development project, so you kind of start out with raised eyebrows with those.
This is true. This is true. It's an aggressive schedule, but I think that we've got a good plan. We've got some good players, and I think that we're moving along. And I think we're going to hopefully hit those timelines and get going from there. So,
we'll move on to the discussion or the Secretary of State's presentation. Scott, could I ask you to make introductions or ask the team leader there to introduce folks? And is there a way to get them on camera somehow?
I think as we speak, we get on camera with the technology in the room. I think the owl grabs our voice and puts us on camera. At least this would be a test if it's truly functioning. And I don't see myself up there yet, but I think that's the idea. We were just recently joined with Secretary of State, Audits Division Director Steve Bergman, and also Deputy Secretary of State Michael Kaplan have joined us today in the room to speak.
Scott,
in part.
Scott, if you unblur your screen, it'll show the whole room.
Oh, very good. Okay. Just a second.
You unblur the background.
Yeah, he's going to camera function real quick.
Where is this then?
You would go to your camera where you're
It's just a second.
down.
Here.
Yeah, it's the option up and don't blur the background. Yeah.
Got it
click
right
it.
there. Does that work?
Can you see us now?
I see
Yep.
two of you, yes,
Is that working?
yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. All right, good. So I think the main idea with the discussion today is to hit on the audit that's pending with the Secretary of State next year. Get some thoughts on that as far as the ideas, the scope, what they're looking at, and then just open it up for discussion. This will be followed by a session where I will be leaving and management will leave, so the Secretary of State can speak with external members of the audit committee directly. So we have that function today. So with that, let's take the floor.
Sure.
Yeah.
Kick things off. Fire away. All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Am I coming through loud and clear, hopefully?
We see you now,
meeting?
yes, thank you.
Okay.
It's
Where,
through the-
oh, it's right here. All right. Well, it's good to see everyone. This is new technology for me. For those I haven't met, my name is Steve Bergman, and I serve as the Audits Director with the Oregon Secretary of State. We're here today to cover two things. The first of which is to provide a brief update on our planned audit. And then we are also going to provide a recap or an overview of Secretary Reed's vision for the Audits Division. At any point in time, feel free to jump in with questions, comments, etc. I'll be tag teaming today with Deputy Secretary of State Michael Kaplan as well, who's in the room with us as well. So before diving in and talking about our upcoming audit here at this agency, I would love to provide a little bit of context for how we got to where we're at. So the audit plan that was published in February of this year and includes PDSC on the plan. That audit plan was largely developed before Secretary Reed took office by our former Audits Division Director and others. We inherited the plan, if you will. And so you'll notice that in future editions of the plan, drafts of the plan, it'll likely be much different. And we'll go into the details for why that is today. So what you read in the audit plan, and I'll cover it here in a second, is very, I would say, vague at a very high level, and can lead to a lot of openings. I think that it's extremely vague. So let me cover what the audit plan says right now as published. It will assess risks related to the ability to provide timely and effective legal representation to eligible persons. It may include examining defense services provided to minority populations. It may assess how the Office of Public Defense Services is achieving its mission. It may assess states' governance structure for public defense. It may assess if public defender caseloads are manageable and aligned with leading practices. It'll also look at whether public defenders are properly trained and credentialed. And then lastly, it may review if the use of third-party legal services is effective. So again, very high level, very kind of, I would say, vague. What we plan to do as part of our audit process, we will kick it off in 2026. We haven't established the start date yet. But when we do kick it off, we'll meet with the agency, we'll meet with leadership, we'll meet with many folks, if not everyone on this call in this meeting, and we will perform a preliminary risk assessment. Our goal with the audit will be to provide value to the state, of course, and to provide an impactful audit report. We certainly don't want to issue an audit report that says things that we all know. We want to provide value, and a lot of that will be driven through the risk assessment we perform when we start the audit.
I could just add, we're just about completing one. In fact, we did complete a risk assessment with 28 different stakeholders. So I'll be providing that to the Secretary of State in the next week or two.
Oh,
So
fantastic.
you have that if you want to leverage it for your work.
Absolutely. Yeah, we'd love that. 100%. And so I guess transitioning to kind of where we're headed in the future, Secretary Reed, when he was sworn in and took office in January of this year, He tasked the audits division and myself as well with essentially developing an enterprise risk model that is driven by risk and is fully data driven. And so right now we're in the process of developing a model that will incorporate what we're calling risk indicators. And those risk indicators will drive our audit focus. And so examples of potential risk indicators could include things like the number of overtime hours worked at an agency, or the proportion of personal services and supplies and services spend in relation to the legislatively adopted budget. These aren't really glamorous, risk indicators, but they are data-driven, publicly accessible indicators that will drive risk and drive our audit plan efforts moving forward. So
Talk towards that,
oh,
because that's your mic. So when you talk that way, it reverberates.
Okay, gotcha. So am I coming through all right? Am I coming through clearly?
I see you pretty well.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so essentially we want to develop risk indicators that will drive our audit plan efforts. So that will be kind of the approach moving forward that we do. Maybe a couple of other notes here with this risk model effort. We want to reduce bias when selecting audits. We want to demystify how audits are selected at the Secretary of State's office. And hopefully this model will aggregate data and essentially drive our auditing efforts. We want to have audit reports that don't sit on the shelf and just collect dust. We want to have actionable reports that are clear. We want clear scope and objectives, and future audit plans will have a higher degree of clarity with regard to what it is we're going to be honing in on. So I say that after covering kind of this broad, approach. So with that, Deputy Secretary, anything we can add here?
No, I think it was fairly comprehensive. The Secretary Reed does want audits that are value add to agencies. So we know that certainly very aware that PDSC has been through a lot recently. So when we do arrive next year, we want to make sure that our engagement here is one that leads to a product that can be very useful. Steve's right, the audit as it is currently communicated is pretty broadly scoped. We need to refine that, and so that will be a process that our audit team engages with when they get here, and then we'll take it from there. Writ large, the Secretary's goal is to very much make the audit function is a direct correlation to the better performance of state government. And given that we have limited resource, limited capacity, we're just we're 70-person shop for a 45,000 person enterprise. We are going after the biggest and riskiest things that we can find, and using lessons learned over time. If you've been in state government long enough, you have ideas about what leads to a program or an agency performing poorly. We want to get in and have impact before that happens. So we're looking for leading indicators of risk across the enterprise, which is an effort that's underway right now. We don't think, as Steve alluded to, those are not really complex questions. Is someone routinely over budget? Are they going in front of the e-board a lot? Do they have the appropriate management experience? Those kinds of things are some of the questions that we're going to be looking to ask, and then that's where we will direct our audit resource toward. So that's the future of the division. We're well underway, but we are still dealing with an audit plan we inherited. So a lot of work to do, but we're looking forward to next year for sure.
So before the interns conference, you guys will narrow the scope down to like specific parameters and specific what you're looking for tied to the risk assessment?
Before the interns conference, yes, we will narrow down where we're going. But the preliminary risk assessment will occur before the entrance conference, of course.
Okay.
And so we'll have a lot of outreach and engagement before that occurs. Maybe I'll also throw in there, because it seems like great timing. If you have ideas, feedback on risk factors for an enterprise risk model, by no means, feel free to share. We are open to feedback. We welcome folks reaching out. We have developed a new email inbox to solicit ideas on risk factors statewide and enterprise-wide. Again, we're hoping to obtain publicly accessible data to drive our, these risk indicators. So the inbox we've created is called risk.factors@sos.oregon.gov. And again, we're directing folks to this inbox to provide feedback. We've had an abundance of feedback already provided to us, and we welcome any and all. So if you're aware of any publicly available data sets in particular or ideas, feel free to route it there. And this model is constantly evolving as well, but our goal is to be very transparent and let the data really kind of inform our focus moving forward.
Are you guys utilizing the governor's expectation reporting that's been published, that goes out?
No.
Those reports show our outstanding audit findings,
Recommendations.
recommendation status, shows exposure, shows our our hiring exposure risk and things like that. It goes over all of the open government issues that the governor is tracking.
So the governor, we're constitutionally independent,
Yeah.
so we won't be.
But it's a public data
Understand.
records that's
We're-
what it says. Yeah.
We're gonna approach it from an independent standpoint, and not go in the draft of work that's being done via the governor's office. So we won't be sort of intaking any work there. We'll be doing a completely arm's length approach from our vantage point.
Awesome.
So it sounds to me from the way you describe it as though the primary goal of the enterprise risk assessment is to identify at the agency level what agencies represent or appear to represent the highest risks, and to direct the audits division attention at those agencies, but that will be followed. I mean, if as you're describing with this agency, once an agency is on your audit plan, there will also be an agency level risk assessment that will help to focus your audit in that agency. Is that correct?
That's exactly right. However, we are still looking at opportunities to aggregate multiple agencies at one time. You may have noticed in our past, we've done multi-agency audits or enterprise-wide audits. And so we still will keep that on the table if there's an opportunity for that. But right now, our effort is driven, like you said, at an agency-specific level. And then once we identify those agencies that are, triggering those risk indicators that we're establishing here, then we will go into those agencies and narrow it down even further. You've got it right.
Thank you.
Any further comments, questions, or any additional information we can provide that would be helpful?
Is any of that driven by public concern or public comment? Like public, because this meeting is public, so does public concern have the ability to contact the Secretary of State and say, I see when I interact with this agency or when this group interacts with this agency, we encounter this XYZ problem, and then adding it to like intent for like access to public funds for like defense and things like that, or the ability to work with the agency itself from the public's perspective for audit. Is that something you guys are?
So we have a fraud, waste, and abuse hotline in which the public can engage, in which we get anecdotal feedback, which does inform our risk targeting, our risk, how we view risk at individual agencies. However, the secretary is responding to pretty significant feedback when he was running for office about depoliticizing and debiasing risk choices. And in many ways, by the time the public is flagging an issue, especially at a very high level or a very loud level, it's usually being reported in the media. Our hope is to get to problems before they escalate to that level, as opposed to responding to
Putting out forest fires.
yeah,
Stopping
kind
the
of.
thing that ignites the fire.
Well, yeah, exactly right. That's a great metaphor. And also, at that point, in whether it's true or not, you are also responding to a political problem. And if we want to ensure the integrity of the audit function, we want to be at the forefront again when the embers are in the air, not necessarily when the fire is raging. That's the hope. And we think that that's the most efficient place to arrest a problem before it gets into a full-blown crisis. So it will take us time to refine that model and to sort of see if we're successful on that front. In some cases, very confident we will be. In other cases, we will definitely miss risks. But over time, if we are very diligent about documenting that, then we should land in a place where we have a risk model that does a really good job of seeing where problems might emerge in the future.
I love that, because I think a lot of the agencies have a lot of audit fatigue, because they feel like audits are reactive and not proactive. And so, especially with Secretary of State, they just see it as like, oh, your financial audit, or oh, they're tacking on this audit because they did the financial audit, instead of it being a proactive approach. Like, why don't you help us catch these risks before they turn into an event, a compromising event of some sort? But it's nice to have a proactive approach versus reactive to after something happened, or telling us something that we already know. Yeah, we already know, we've done all this. We're just waiting for the legislature to give more money to the agency to fix the problem. Yeah. Thank you.
I'm taking from the comments that the audit is going to be, or the Secretary of State audit is going to be focused on the agency's ability to deliver the goal, right, of public defense services, and less on the people with whom the agency contracts to provide those services. I mean, that's like, I guess, part one, the question, and then part two, which is a comment, and I hope I'd be interested to see how this plays out over time. There's a couple of measures, whether or not caseloads are manageable, whether or not they're providing quality, there's quality work that's being provided, and like whether or not there's like sufficient training that are being provided. That I know it's going to be an interesting way to see how those become data driven. And I know that those are important. That the quality of the work is something that we care about a lot, and both at the individual provider level and at the agency level, I know that everyone cares about the quality of work a lot. But I'm interested to know how the Secretary of State is going to be evaluating quality. Finally, with the comments that a lot, we're public defenders, right? I mean, a lot. What is the expectation of us, winning cases? Is it like going to trials? Is it, are we getting not guilties? And is that something that, the government or the agency is really focused on? So I guess those are some of the questions that I have, and some of the direction I'd be interested in knowing where these audits would be going.
I think it's a little premature to comment on where the audit of PDSC will go or what exactly we're looking at. Again, that will be informed by risk assessment and scoping work that has yet to be done. We definitely acknowledge that it is too broadly communicated right now, and that narrowing down does have to occur. So it is definitely on our list of things to do before the audit begins. But I don't think we'd be in a position today to say one way or another where we're going to head exactly or what we'll be judging that audit on. We don't have the resources to audit every component of the agency. Obviously, we're going to have to pick and choose. And that will largely be up to the auditing team. They have a lot of independence, but we do know that it will get narrower over time as we get closer. And then the scope of the audit will be very clearly communicated when we kick it off.
Thank you.
Can you give us a sense of how long you anticipate the engagement to last, and what resources of the agency you may need to support your work?
Yeah, great question. Normally when we conduct a performance audit, if we have a really narrow scope or we're able to scope down the audit, we can be really quick meaning, 3-4 months, maybe 5 months. But for some of the more wider, broad engagements, the heavier topics, sometimes they can be upwards of 9 to 12 months even. So it really depends on how that preliminary scoping goes and what we, set those objectives at. And so we'll be sure to be as, highly communicative with the agency as we can, and make sure that we keep Scott and the whole team updated as we move along, and we'll be communicating regularly our information needs. I think that at this point, all we can ask and hope for is to have, just openness from the agency to meet with us. Setting up reasonable, interview timelines so we can meet and connect and ask questions and answers. At this point, we're conducting a lot of our audit work in the remote work world. So that is, of course, subject to change, but I would expect lots of Teams meetings. If we could, reasonably, we want to be reasonable with our audit workload as well. I mean, if there's something going on at the agency, or if you've got, I don't know, special session, or if there's some type of legislative thing going on, please communicate that with us. We'll do our best to work with you. But again, we'll communicate our audit needs and introduce you to the audit manager assigned to this engagement once we've got that figured out on our end as well.
Is there any indication in the audit plan that you've inherited whether this audit is contemplated as a large audit or a small audit, more likely to be a 3 to 4 month audit or a 9 to 12 month audit? Has there been any preliminary assessment of the resources that your office will devote to this project?
Not at this time. No,
No.
we need to get in and do the preliminary scoping and risk assessment work before we can, speak
No,
to
I
that.
understand. It's just in my experience, often an annual audit plan identifies, these are going to be major projects. These are going to be less involved, but that hasn't been done at all with this plan. Okay, it's just currently
No.
just a list of things you might do without any indication of which ones are going to be more involved and which less. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mhm. Getting used to the technology, by the way. Sorry, I keep looking at the screen.
It gets better. I can see it on there. Good.
What
Any
made
other
you-
questions from audit committee members?
Yeah, what made you guys keep the audit plan versus just scrapping it and revising, knowing that the scope need to be narrowed?
There's just timing. Secretary takes office in January, audit plan is due in February.
Okay,
The time to put together a credible audit plan to essentially start over. Steve started as brand new audit director with
right.
Secretary Reed coming in. We, lesser of two evils at that point. So we're going to certainly make the best out of every audit we do, but it is not informed by Secretary Reed's sort of philosophy of how we should be handling audit. That's mostly what we're communicating, is that we do know that, to your point, some of the choices on our audit plan were reactive. Not a place he's especially thrilled about being, but we'll get it squared away for this next one.
I mostly asked that question for public benefit, since it's a public meeting, so that, because, public is gonna be like, well, why are they
Yep.
not just scrapping it and starting over?
Yep, totally.
So you don't anticipate revising the audit plan for this year? Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Does Secretary of State have anything to add?
No, other than thank you for having us come. I really appreciate it. I think that having a nice open line of communication and connection is really healthy and important. Please don't hesitate to reach out. And again, I'll just put a friendly plug, risk.factors@sos.oregon.gov. Please do feel free to send any feedback or ideas that way.
Okay,
Thank
and
you.
when do you think we might expect to hear from you again?
I think that, it's likely in 2026, or possibly December of this year, we'll probably reach out and try to coordinate, but I'd like to get, some communication going at the early part of next year. If that works for everyone on the call, we can follow up with Scott and others, to coordinate further.
Good.
All right, thanks very much.
Yeah, thank
For
you.
coming.
Yeah, appreciate it.
And you guys are invited to stick around for the next conversation. to provide a little background, our audit charter provides for 3 different types of meetings to be held at least annually. One is time on the agenda for the external audit committee members to meet with the chief audit executive in the absence of the commission and OPDS members. So essentially, the external members and the CAE have an opportunity to meet. Similarly, at least one meeting where there is time set aside for the committee, the audit committee, the whole audit committee, to meet in the absence of the chief audit executive. And lastly, at least once a year, financial and performance audit managers from the Secretary of State's office will be invited to a meeting during which time is set aside for meeting with external committee members in the absence of the commission member, management members, and the chief audit executive. Now, all three of these meetings were established in the charter at a time when audit committee meetings were considered not to be public meetings, and the purpose was to provide an opportunity for various segments of the audit committee and management to share concerns that they might have in regard to the other. In other words, if an opportunity for the CAE to share with the audit committee any concerns he might have about management and its relationship to internal audit. Similarly, an opportunity for management to share any concerns they might have with the audit committee about the chief audit executive and his performance in the absence of the chief audit executive, and an opportunity for the audit committee as a whole, without the chief audit executive present, to share concerns that they might have with one another and with the Secretary of State's office. This is the scheduled meeting with the Secretary of State without either management members or the CAE present. Obviously, since we are meeting in a public session, it is not going to be the same meeting that was contemplated in the audit charter. And I would just caution the external members and our guests that that this is a public meeting, and the recording of this meeting will be available to those people who are being asked to leave the meeting. So it's not the same, confidential communication that was contemplated, but it is an opportunity to address this obligation in our charter to hold such a meeting and to share concerns that people may have and are willing to raise in a public session. So that being said, I'd ask Scott and Ralph and Kim to please leave the meeting at this point.
Bye, Scott. He's walking out the room.
Yes, did Ralph have his hand up? Did he have a question? No, okay. Maybe he was just waving goodbye. Okay. So are we the only external members left? Reed and
and Jacqueline is in
oh,
here.
I'm sorry, Jacqueline. I don't see you on the
That's
screen.
fine.
Yeah. Okay, good. So with the background of what I've just described, this is an opportunity to say anything you might wish to say in a public session about management, the CAE, their relationship to one another, their performance in regard to internal audit or on the audit committee.
I
And
think
John,
it just has to be about budget. So utilizing the funds that were given to implement the IT structure and the findings that he has being so outstanding, waiting on the implementation of the system in order to resolve the findings. Just the appearance of it reminds me of, and you guys can time travel with me, go back to 2020 when the employment department had a system they were supposed to put in place. It delayed it, and then we had the pandemic happened and the mass amount of people who applied for unemployment, and then finding that the system was inadequate to process the payments that it needed to, and then them having to roll out a new system in the midst of the pandemic and then switch all the people and the disruption to the businesses, because it didn't just switch like the taxes for the business for employment, but also now with unemployment insurance and paid leave and all the disruption to that agency and the extra money that had to be spent on top of the budget. So I look at the fact that the delay of the budget for implementing the FCMS system and the value it adds to the public, and then how long it's taking and how much money is being spent on it, and the amount of personnel that's limited duration, and then amount of audit findings that were open from it that are sitting delayed because of that implementation. So I just concerned about the expenditure, and then at what point are they gonna exhaust those funds, and then how are those funds being used? And then is it for the public's benefit? Because if, as a layperson for public, I hear $13 million for a software system and 9 million of that is the software system, I think, and it's gonna take another 2 years before the biennium hits. It's raising, like, from a public perspective, it's raising flags. Like, why is it taking that long? When like systems like Francis Online went online less than 6 months during the pandemic. So you have other systems at other agencies rolling out full case management within a year, and this agency has been working on it for years. What's going on? Not criticizing anybody working, it's just public perception. So explaining the why behind it and being more transparent of what's the delay, why it's happening, what's taking so long, where's the money being spent.
Got it.
And without blaming management, because I know some people are new and it was thrust upon them and they have limited duration, they had some staff turnover, but that's the only thing that ever comes to mind in these meetings.
Sure.
Yeah.
And this agency has had a lot of turnover at senior levels and IT director as well. So, I think it may, I mean, to a degree, it's probably a reluctance on the part of new people to do what the Secretary of State's office does and just accept whatever plan was in place for replacement of this system when they came on board, and wanting to take a fresh look at the acquisition process and the specifications for the system. I think that's been a significant contributor to the delay. One of the major concerns with delays in IT development is always, that the cost of the system increases, every day that the system is delayed. And if you're not getting additional resources to implement the system, the longer you wait to do it, the less resource you have to actually accomplish what you want.
On the FCMS issue, I'm not sure if it was something that I missed or if that's something that is the agency is still working on. But if the FCMS is the case management and payment system, then there's going to be an expense to the providers to also have similar systems who are similar software, right? And similar training and understanding about how to use that, which it's not clear right now if that is a cost that the agency is going to be expecting the providers to pay. You are going to have this whatever, if it's off the shelf or if it's there's a word for the if it's like
Custom
home, yeah, homebrew or
home.
something like that, right? Like, is this something that we are going to pay for you to have, or is this something that you are going to pay in order to do the work, or in order to get paid for the work, I guess. So there's a barrier, and I'm not sure if in the conversations that we had today, that barrier has been identified, and if that barrier is identified as to where it's going to be, where it's going to land. So I think that that's something that if we're on the topic of the FCMS, which has been something that's been going on for many, many, many years, longer than most of the people that I think on this group have been involved with the agency. That is something that I'm very hopeful that we're getting to the end of that. But there is that one worry that I continue to have.
Mhm. Certainly seems like a legitimate worry to me. I mean, I think my sense is that it's been a something of a pattern in the state that providers bear a significant burden of the cost of providing uh, defense services.
And I'll add just one more thing, that if there is a data migration that needs to happen, the costs for large nonprofit firms that have many more attorneys and many more cases and a significantly higher amount of data is going to be more burdensome, right, than for an individual who may have, 5 years of public defense work, however many cases that is, over a firm that has 40 years of public defense work with, between 10 and 30 attorneys at any given time. So that data migration is something that, we've been, from our perspective, is something that we've been kind of putting off as the agency works through this FCMS decision. But, these, like I said, if we're talking about risks to the agency, as everyone pointed out, the cost increase the longer it goes. And, there's one of the things that I did not hear, and I was going to ask about, I'm going to use this as a transition point, that I did not hear and was going to ask about, but I think we ran out of a little bit of time, is that one of the key performance measures that I'm hopeful the agency will turn to or start using, and if they are not evaluating this, is whether or not OPDC is growing the workforce, whether or not they're expanding the number of attorneys who are taking cases. I think that, to me, that is a key performance measure that the agency needs to be like at every meeting, right? Every commission meeting or every legislative session, they need to say, we added X number of attorneys this year. We had, 5% more attorneys who are signed up to take cases on contract, right? We're adding these people, or we allowed for a hiring class to one of the large nonprofits of, 6, we're going to allow them to hire 6 people straight out of law school with the intent that, 5 years from now, they'll be taking, a lot of serious cases. I do think that workforce development is a key performance measure. I think that workforce development is one that is measurable, and is measurable like every, maybe not every year, or no, excuse me, maybe not every month, but every quarter, right? That's something that they can check in on. And I think that that is one that I don't know if I that it is not a priority, or does not seem to be a priority in their key performance measures, seems to be something of a risk. And on the same line in workforce development, and I know that the agency had, or OPDC had, a workforce development committee at some point or subcommittee at some point, as an agency committee, not a commission committee, like there is still, I think, a little bit of tension, or maybe a little bit of tension is understating it. There's still tension between the providers and right now OPDC and OPDC management about what the roster of costs is going to be, like what the providers are going to be offered to provide the same amount of services that they currently provide. And if the providers are not, those numbers haven't been finalized yet, and I know that, the OPDC has set, benchmarks for when they're going to have these numbers out to the providers. But if that roster of costs comes out on Friday, or it comes out on Monday, that's what, 2 weeks until the end of the contract, right? The contract ends on October 1st, and it doesn't give either the commission, or it doesn't a lot of flexibility in addressing that. It doesn't give providers a lot of flexibility in if they're going to have to make changes. And a lot of I think there's a lot of concern that people are going to have to make changes. And if they're going to have to make changes in a way that is negative, then I think that there is, with that short turnaround, I think that increases the risks. I mean, the biggest risk to the agency is that it doesn't have people re-sign up, recommit to do this work. So there is, I think, a lot of, to me, outreach that OPDC as a agency, as opposed to a commission, could be doing. And I'll end that there.
Thank you. So like a disconnect from the public they serve and the communications timely. And like looking at, like, from an audit perspective, if their communication is timely and allows for like attorneys to make internal changes in alignment with payment structures to know whether or not they want to sign up to be due public defense.
Yeah, and I think there's a feedback, right, and an ability to, like a negotiation period, that when the contract, the time from offer to date for acceptance is like super compressed. If there are changes, then having more time would be helpful, right? And either preview what is going to go into the roster of costs, considerably earlier, so that people can start having the conversation about what resources need to be in any community. Starting that conversation earlier, not just saying like, hey, wait, we'll just we'll tell you what our expected, what the forecasting says. We're still working on the forecasting. When we have the numbers, we'll give you the forecasting. That being able to like either do the forecasting earlier and communicate that so that we can have a conversation or negotiation about the resources that are targeted for each community, each judicial district, I think would be helpful, rather than, kind of we get our forecasting. When we get our forecasting, it gets close to the date of the expiration of the contracts. Like I said, the expiration of the current contracts are at the end of this month. This is pressure and tension, and pressure and tension don't feel bad, and predictability and the perception that there's that predictability is real, feels good. And predictability really helps people stay in the profession, right? Like having to have these conversations every other year is very stressful, and takes a lot of time away from the work. So I just wanted to add that idea. If we're talking about workforce
How would
development,
you audit for that? How would you look to see from an audit perspective? Like, as an auditor, I'm thinking about how you would potentially find that accountability. Would you interview attorneys to see the gap, the window? Would you look at the communication going out from the agency to the attorney network to see their timely response? Would you look at the contract itself to see how long the window opens is for negotiation? Cause like I think of it like as a union, when we argue with union, we have a central table, we have a table discussion. Is there such a thing? I lack knowledge and knowing how it works in this agency, to be honest,
So-
because I'm external.
Yeah, so I'll say that what tends to happen is that the agency, the recent contract cycles, the agency has given out the standard terms of the contract, and those includes, the ones that currently the Department of Justice has to review, right? Like this is where like jurisdiction for disputes. This is what the definitions are. This is what a caseload is. This is what maximum attorney capacity is like. These are the things that you're going to be doing, right? So there's that section of the contract is usually similar year to or biennium to biennium with some changes. And there's a lot of discussion about that. And the commission is engaged in a lot of discussion about those issues because those things happen over a longer period of time. The second,
There's mostly like a fee table.
yeah, so the second part of the negotiation is I guess what they're currently calling the roster of costs. Like the total the financial side of the contract. So at some point the agency is going to make a determination about these are the resources that we feel your county needs or that your agency needs to fulfill the contract. This is what we're contracting with you for. And so that's where the personnel costs come in. They're identified as currently MAC. We used to call them FTE, full-time equivalent. And so in the old days, before we had MAC and before we had FTE and when we're still pay per case, it was just a dollar amount. Like we're giving you X amount of dollars and you can spend that in any way with the expectation that you'll be taking cases that have a total value of this. And then people would get behind,
Right.
or people would get ahead, and there's like a lot of inefficiencies going in there. So like if that's our current contracting model, what has been, pretty consistent is that the standard or general terms of the contract have been identified and talked about by the commission at several meetings or, for the preceding 6 months. And then the thing that happens like really short at the end is, hey, this is the number of people we're going to allow you to employ. And so that's where like the rubber meets the road for these contracts. And it's not a sit down at the table and have a negotiation. It's like you've identified to us how many cases that you take and how many attorneys you think you need. This is what we're going to give you. This is what we're allocating for that area. And that happens pretty quickly. And as the management said, it
Do
hasn't
you
happened.
feel in your expertise, since you come from that area, do you feel the agency itself is addressing the risk for the exposure for that?
I'm sorry to interject. We're gonna have to get going.
Yeah.
Yeah, no worries.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Do you feel the agency is addressing that risk exposure of pricing the correct amount of services? Like,
It's hard to
do
say.
you think that we need that the state itself has priced itself out of both the appropriate coverage?
It's hard to say in this cycle because this is the first cycle where we're in the executive department and this is the first time in which a lot of the forecasting was handled by the Department of Administrative Services. So in preceding contract cycles, there were analysts that were assigned to each, they were like, I don't know, like 5 or 6 analysts. Each of them had a couple of counties, and then they were like watching that county all biennium, just kind of seeing what the caseloads are, seeing what the filings were, if there are increases or decreases, and then at the end of that, biennium or towards the end of the biennium, the analyst who had been watching that county all biennium can say like, this is where we're seeing the trends. This is where we think that the filings are going to go. So it's hard to say this year if it's different just because it's from the Department of Administrative Services, because we don't know what their forecasting models are, and we don't know what forecasting models are being used. We don't know if the Department of Administrative Services is doing the forecasting. We just don't know how that is
Like
happening.
they're just guessing off of prior data. I wonder if that's something that Scott can add to his audit plan for like next year after 1 year period of it being rolled out the way that it is to determine whether or not that the amount that was set aside actually felt the need of the public for defense. Does that make sense? That there was enough funding and enough staffing to cover the in amount of cases that were needed. And whether or not that fleshed out accordingly. Because I'm thinking from an audit committee perspective in establishing the risk to the public, that might be something that we need to have him look into from a risk perspective. Like, I don't even know if it's on his risk register because he just completed his risk state. He was telling us about the turn into Secretary of State to Christine McCants, but I wonder if it's even on their thought process of the risk of it itself when it comes to that.
I don't know the answer.
I think that that's valid though.
if
I mean,
I
if you're wanting to track the numbers, like you said, of how many attorneys are signing up and we have enough to cover. And we want to look at, hiring more, if we're not appropriately allocating as a state, that percentage of those FTEs, then we're not gonna get the people who want it. Cause if you're saying, oh, we'll pay you an FTE of 30,000 a year, and those attorneys can go be a defender elsewhere and not do public defendants and go do elsewhere, they're not gonna wanna sign up for something that's not gonna even cover what they do for their billable hours, right? We have to be competitive enough to offer public defense, at the same time not price us out of it, where the people can't afford, we have no one who's taking the public defense. There's already a lack of attorneys, hence why they made the certified paralegals allowed to represent for indigent people. So, I mean, people who don't have enough monies and they don't have enough counsel, like from family law. So I think it's important for something that stops that way to cover that risk.
Reed, is the process that you're describing the agency's projection and allocation process, is that being used in some way to determine what resources are available to the agency, or are they simply figuring out how to allocate among the different counties the resources that the legislature has already determined will be the resources for the agency?
I'm not sure, John. That might be a better
see.
question for the management, but I feel like it's the latter.
Yeah.
They make a pitch for what the budget is going to be. The legislature sets a ceiling for the amount of expenditures for the provision of these services, absent agency or administrative costs, and then the agency then kind of fits what they have, and then we run the risk. There's always a risk that we run out of money at the end of the biennium too, right? So
Yeah.
there's a lot of competing interests, I think, that go into the forecast.
And are you saying that providers are not a part of this process at all until this allocation is released and they're negotiating how much they'll get on their own contract? Is that
maybe
right?
maybe that's a perception.
I see.
It may not be far from the truth, but I think right
And
now I would say that it's a perception at this point.
Yeah, you mentioned that there was a committee at one point that the Workforce Development Committee. Is there provider representation on that committee?
The Workforce Development Committee was an or at that time OPDS committee that was established and met like every other month, I think, to develop strategies to build workforce, right? To develop recruiting strategies, to develop outreach to the law schools, to recruit in the law schools, to try and set up, like, to maybe identify plans, if like a fellowship program for rural communities, like to come up with strategies that the agency could use to recruit people to the workforce, right? So that was, to me, what I think the Workforce Development Committee was. I think that hasn't met for a couple of years now, maybe. I think this is more of a 2021 to 23-ish.
Okay. Okay. Well, and I think both of these are ideas that we could pass on to Scott when as he's developing his audit plan. I don't know to what extent he intends to follow the lead of the Secretary of State in wanting to have the audit plan driven entirely by the risk assessment and not be influenced by any other factors like what a provider on the audit committee is concerned about, or
That's because
Yeah.
Yellow Book requires, they go by Yellow Book and they're required to do it by risk assessment.
mhm.
And that's how they're supposed to set their scope, and so they can't set it by like a bias, like someone saying, even if it was non-biased, meaning that we're external, so we have no stake in it, we're unbiased, right, in that regard, like, we're just like kind of public officials just weighing in from our expertise. They still can't take us, they have to go by Yellow Book, and Yellow Book is like pretty hardcore about like developing your risk. Whereas like Red Book is more like you can take the opinions and do advisory and go from consulting to an audit. So Yellow Book's like, yeah. That's probably why. That's my guess, going from Yellow Book to Red Book.
Well, I think
And wanting to be nonpartisan, like he said, reillustrated the fact that we are agency and we answer to the governor, them being Secretary of State, not wanting to be, influenced by governor agenda.
the
Even though
Secretary
we're
of State's
as
also an
government
elected
employees,
official.
we're non-biased as well. I mean, we're not
Yeah.
political either. So
And
I don't
bottom
know.
line is the Secretary of State is a politician as well, and we'll see how effectively they've managed to be driven by their risk assessment rather than by the Secretary of State's preferences.
Well,
Well,
and Scott can
luckily,
watch.
it goes through the audit committee, so if we get the report from the Secretary of State before it's finalized with Scott and management, we are able to interject how they maybe were off scope or off base or their findings, and then write a response. I mean, we're most certainly
Oh,
able
yeah,
to
yeah. No,
respond.
I was referring to the Secretary of State's audit plan for his office.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they have a statute requirement, like I think it's in the OARs, was saying that they have required to do their audit plan every year in February, and he was elected in January, so wouldn't have
Yeah.
given him a high enough window to write an audit
Sure.
plan that was already drafted by the prior administration.
Right.
I do like their proactive approach. I have seen it in their annual audits. I don't know, are any of you guys active auditors for the state?
Oh,
I
no.
don't really know. So I'm the chief audit executive and chief risk officer for the Oregon Military Department. And I have gotten to see some of the things the Secretary of State's been rolling out underneath Steve as the new director for the audits division. And it's been really nice. I mean, he's taken some of the hotline requests. He's implemented like new transparency with the agencies about things that come through. He's been really like just a whirlwind of difference. Really highly impressed. So I will be interested to see what they come up with for scope though for their audit of this agency.
Yeah.
There's hardly
a clue in what they've presented so far. I mean,
well, they
it
don't
could
know
be
yet
anything.
because they haven't dived into anything. They have the very vague, flowery, overreaching, really know how we're gonna look at risk. Well, what does that mean?
Yeah.
So, yeah, when they actually narrow their scope down and the work papers, it will be interesting to see where they actually land. Like, are they gonna look at how the agency provides what they need to, or are they gonna look at the IT perspective? Are they gonna look at the budget? Are they gonna look at both? We'll see.
They have to narrow it down or they'll be here for years.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, I think that they can, Christine McCants, which is an auditor in the Secretary of State that gets the risk assessment for every agency. It's required by ORS that we submit a risk assessment every year to the Secretary of State. And with the one that Scott just put together, they should be able to look at that and formulate something about, you know, the impact and likelihood and the residual impact and likelihood of risk to narrow down some kind of scope. We'll see.
Yeah,
If they
I
look at
suspect,
that.
I suspect that the agency risk assessments fall into the same category as the one you mentioned to the governor's office, that they want to do it themselves. They're not going to rely on
Because
assessment.
those ones go to the Secretary of State, they do review them, but they don't always utilize them when setting
Yeah.
their stuff. Yeah. Yep.
Well, it'll be interesting to see.
It's subjectively objective. Does that make sense? It's very much by what they want to do, but from their objective point of view. Yeah. As long as it adds value, I do like that they're focusing on adding value to the agency and commissions in order to fulfill better service to the public. I think that should be the end goal for all audits. Like the audit is not a gotcha or we're here to find something and then point something out. It is about you know, how do we fix what we have and mitigate risk to the best? Because truly the public's perception of risk tolerance is 0. Like you shouldn't be taking on any risk. You should be mitigating it to the full %. So you shouldn't have any risk when it comes to government, right? We should be risk adverse because you're dealing with public funds, public tax dollars, public service, safety, health, things like that. So yeah.
Well, public defense is a tricky agency because it doesn't make things, you know, it doesn't make
Yeah.
widgets. It doesn't, you know,
It just manages the dollar.
it's just work, right? It's just work. And I think there's a lot of feelings about what the work should be and how much
Mhm.
time should be spent on the work. And so I do think that the risk assessment tools, and I hope the Secretary of State risk assessment dives into this as well, a little bit about what the agency, what OPDC, the agency's role, like real goals and role are, right? Like, is it developing the workforce? Is it, you know, shaping the work? Is it advocating for, you know, both public defenders and clients? Or is it something different? Like, is it a risk management agency? Is it a government? Is it a funding pass-through agency? I think that's one of the tensions that exists right now, and I think that's there's enough new people at the agency, right, in executive management that I think that that learning curve is they're still on the learning curve. So.
Mhm. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
curious. I'm curious if you have any sense of what the provider community thinks of the move toward hiring public defenders as state employees, which seems to be a major effort in the agency now, is to build a cadre of state employees who provide public defense.
I think the answer to that, John, is that there is no unified block for this idea, and there's like deep philosophical reasons to be one or the other within the provider community.
I see.
And you know, we see how it's worked. You know, I went to law school in Missouri where they have a state agency, all state employees, and you know, I have a feeling about how well that worked. And other people have, you know, and it's one where you can see the same thing and think that it's good or think that it's bad. So I really think that the community is not unified in its belief on what the best way to deliver, like the best service model is.
And it seems to me as though the state hasn't made any decision on that yet either. I mean, it seems to me we're headed toward an increasing blend of independent contractors and state employees. Now, I wonder whether whether once there is a cadre of state employees providing the same services that the independent contractors are, whether it will improve the state's perspective on what it costs the independent contractors to provide this service. Because they'll have a better sense of what it's costing the state to provide that service.
Well, if it's anything like the way that fire runs, a lot of the independent fire crews will base their operations and their cost of doing business on how much the state pays their fire crews and services and military state employees. We see a lot of that with union contracts. So we have a lot of people that wait for our central table and discussions on how to pay our firefighters down in K Falls and Pang before they determine what they'll pay their firefighters elsewhere. So sometimes it flips over time.
Well, parity
We
with district attorney's offices and the attorney general's offices has been a long dream. So
Yeah.
if the state lands on that, then I think people will not be complaining.
Yeah.
Scott would like to know if he's able to rejoin now.
Yes, I need to go to I need to go to court in a moment.
And we're at the end of our time unless folks have other urgent business. I don't have
anything else. And I don't know Scott.
Yeah. And
Or
I don't know if
anything else.
I don't know if the other members of our committee are waiting outside or
Scott's just waiting outside the door. Do you want me
Okay.
to grab him?
why don't you ask Scott to come in and he
He's
can tell
coming.
us whether the other
Do you have any
whether
other
the managing
business?
members will be joining us.
Nope. Any of the other members coming back? Will any of the other members be jumping back online?
Not to my knowledge.
No, not to his
Yeah.
knowledge.
Okay. Then I think we can just go ahead and adjourn.
So
even
moved.
though we're not a quorum to vote on adjournment, I think we can adjourn.
The
Scott,
agenda has us adjourning, so.
Scott, one thing that I noticed in the conversation about public meetings is that we need to include time for public comment.
Okay,
I don't know that we've had any public participation or even observation in our meetings, but it's probably something that we need to include on future agendas.
a good point. We'll get it dialed in.
All right.
All right.
Well, thank you to
Thank
those
you.
who are left.
All right.
We'll see you in a month, or I'm sorry, in 3 months. And yeah. Thanks very
All
much.
right. Take
Bye,
care.
Thank
everyone.
you. Bye-bye.